Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're discussing Westworld and the concept of the mirror world. In the latest episode of Westworld, The Absence of Field, we're introduced to the concept of the mirror world. Now, this isn't something that we weren't expecting. The simulated version of things is something that we've discussed for a long time on this channel, but this was the first time in the show that they outright said that a complete copy of the world exists. Dolores tells us the founders of this machine fed it everyone's raw data, long before privacy laws existed. We know that it's in 2058, and we know that Rehoboam took 15 years to create. Project Solomon initiated in 2039, and since it's believed that Rehoboam is a progression of this system, that makes the development process start somewhere around 2024, which is the exact year Westworld opens to the public. Liam Dempsey Jr. states that his father sketched out the idea over a single weekend, so it isn't clear if Serac is in the development process at this point, from the very beginning, but we do know that they were co-founders, though it is also unclear who knows of them being co-founders. Because think about this for a second. They were openly throwing parties for the son of the person who saved the world through algorithms. How odd is it that Serac's name isn't blasted all over the world? What kind of dystopian future exists where you can scrub your name out of, say the New York Times covering this great achievement? Either something is really fishy here, or I don't know, communism won. But it makes me wonder if Serac is real at all, which is a widely popular theory right now. Perhaps he is simply the virtual avatar of Rehoboam and uses this person to make moves in the real world. After all, the only time we see him with Hale, he is just the hologram of himself. I believe it's entirely possible that this tech could exist in the far future, and that we could just have a trillionaire held up in some castle living like a hermit, but it also leaves open the possibility that he is inside Rehoboam virtually and has access to the system, making it possible to communicate and impact the outside world. He lives on forever as data, and this works perfectly because he is not trying to pick a host body to migrate to. Or potentially he was never real at all. I could see it. In fact, I can't think of any one thing that would disqualify or even challenge this theory, except when you consider this.
We've done frozen moments with hosts where they generally freeze. But in those moments, their hair can still blow because we're still in the real world and the robots are just freezing. In this moment, this is a giveaway that we're in a complete simulation.
This information was provided in the post-credit scene of episode 2, and when you watch Maeve's scene back with Serac, we can see that he presses the button, and guess what we see? Nearly a perfect freeze frame. Her hair falls back into place, meaning this is physically happening in the real world. Now, not to subtract from my own exclamations, but I think it's also fair to address that when the system crashed, it wasn't an instant switch. Everything just didn't stop. The particle effects remained in motion for a brief period. The difference I do believe exists here is that he is pressing the button and her whole body stops with her hair falling into place. The simulation, everything remains at a constant rate of motion until everything stops together. So I think it still does point to this being the real world. Okay, so perhaps he physically exists. This could still be the mirror world that we're seeing. After all, Dolores calls it a composite of our world. She describes that during the early stages of development, which we now know is likely around 2024, every purchase, job search, doctor visit, romantic choice, call, text, every aspect of your lives recorded, logged in order to create a mirror world of this world. In theory, everything could be the mirror world right now. Perhaps just Maeve, perhaps Dolores, perhaps everybody, and Rehoboam is trying to get all the pieces in the right place to win this upcoming battle. Someone is using this and tracking divergences, and in episode 3, they flat out show us one. I didn't cover this in the explained because it felt better as its own theory video, but this scene isn't different due to editing, like it first appears. The conversation, recorded events in history, actually change entirely. On the screen now is the transcript showing exactly how they are different. This is a divergence, possibly the first that we've seen, but we don't have any way to tell which is the real version and which is the mirror world. These aren't edited versions of the same scene. They are literally saying different things.
That I left, you wanted me to sing you a song. I tuck you in to sing you our song. The night that I left, you wanted me to tuck you in to sing you a song. our song.
You may have also noticed in episode 3 the usage of mirrors all over the place. I think two widely known theories align with this anomaly. It could be subtle hints of this mirror world and the implications of having a carbon copy of the world running in tandem on a server somewhere, which is actually a really haunting idea if you think about it. Imagine you having complete privacy, but because this machine knows everything that you've done and everything that you will do, it ultimately doesn't matter. It sees the real you. The other theory that aligns with the usage of these mirrors is, of course, who is inside Charlotte Hale. A lot of things point to Dolores splitting her personality and Wyatt being in control currently. I'm not ready to commit to that just yet, but it could also be evidence of that. But in the essence of seeing the real you, let's discuss this idea of being classified, because this machine sees the real you and it can fit you into categories like we see with Caleb. We've only seen one other character that resented his classification before, William. In season 2, it was implied that this classification came from the Forge, and what he was so upset about is because he was this titan of industry and the machine showed him as lesser and showed these problems that would otherwise limit him. Juliet knew about this, and it appears that this data, the same or similar data, could be given to companies, thus leading to them not wanting to hire people like Caleb here. It's an odd but really interesting link between the Forge and Rehoboam. Now, considering that we know Serac wants this guest data, I have a hard time really thinking about why. But I think I figured it out. We know that the Cradle existed before the park opened because Arnold worked on it, and we know that Westworld opened around the same time that they started development on Rehoboam. I think this leaves open the possibility of the creators being inspired to create this copy world from Arnold and Ford's work on the Cradle, which may be most important of all because it means Anthony Hopkins has a chance to once again appear in the form of a flashback. There is also a really interesting link between Ford and Arnold's story and Liam Dempsey Sr. and Serac's. Both had a single surviving member with a death shrouded in mystery, the surviving member then hiding from the world in their own world. I don't know, it seems like some kind of purposeful connection that they want us to catch on to. But back on subject, this also means that we know the development of Rehoboam and Delos investing in Westworld and then building the Forge happen around the same time. The Forge finished first and started collecting data on guests long before Rehoboam. The only thing I can possibly think that Rehoboam or Serac could want with the guest data in the present, if it isn't this search for immortality, is perhaps upgrading Rehoboam. We've heard mention of different versions of Project Solomon and Rehoboam, and them upgrading to the point of losing track of its speed. If you are hyper-advanced AI meant to write the future of humanity, upgrading yourself would be one of the only core directives you could possibly have. What if Serac got a taste for this guest data and it showed exactly how powerful it could become, meaning the Forge's classifications may actually outweigh Rehoboam's? We see in the most recent episode, Caleb has the classification of U. From the ARG on the Insight Incorporated website, we also get 4 additional categories: P, N, G, and C. Now, if we go back to season 2, the profile that Ford gave William had the classification of 47B. So it's possible that Rehoboam has categories A through Z, thus only 26 possible categories to fit humanity into. Compared to the Forge classification 47B, assuming we have A through Z and assuming we have at least 47 subcategories of each, this makes 1,222 options theoretically available. So this somewhat aligns. We somewhat have proof of this theory. Rehoboam is having more and more divergences and needs that juicy data. But the biggest thing that keeps ping-ponging back and forth in my mind is that they got the data sample 2 decades ago, according to Hale, so roughly 2038. If the system initiated in 2039, how does this sample of data relate to the grand scheme of things? Could this have been the update which allowed them to go public and be so successful? And if it was, why would they need more guest data now? Wouldn't it be simpler to reverse engineer how to create the same data tracking and gather the same information from the bulk of the world using the Insight implant? Or is it once again showing us the power of anonymity and being in Westworld and truly being able to be whoever you want to be, something that you can't do in the real world? Dolores says outright that they fed it everyone's information, and we can now infer that this included the sample of data from Westworld. I'm super interested to know how you get this data from Child Protective Services, purchases, job searches, romantic choices, etc. I mean, part of me kind of builds this picture of a hack the world kind of plot, and they stole it. But at the same time, the inclusion of privacy laws point to companies selling this data, because cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bill, y'all. I think the mirror world is a super interesting part of this story, but the early days of the development have really caught my attention. A few mysteries still exist around this mirror world generating machine, including the death of Liam Dempsey Sr., and I am excited to see that unfold. But with that, we come to the end of the video. Thank you all for your continued support. If you haven't, please consider subscribing today for more discussions about Westworld and whatever other shows you want to hear me talk about. Special thank you to all the wonderful people that support me on Patreon. Our top tier donors this month are Micheal, Linck, Robert Holtz, Jeff Chunn, Logan, Feewet, Elliott Enriquez, and our newest member, Melissa Fassetta. If you have any additional evidence for or against this theory or anything stated in this video, please sound off in the comments below and add to the incredible discussion about this incredible show. Much love, everybody, and I can't wait to talk to you all again soon.